Well, thank you for tuning in to Searching for the Sacred, where I am going to help you find the divine one breath at a time. In this episode of Searching for the Sacred, I want to talk about the Bible today. This is the main book that Christians use to understand God and life and purpose and meaning. So whether you're a Christian or not, it'd be good for you to understand what this is all about. Even though this book seems to be controversial, I'm not sure why, but it does. No matter where you are in your spiritual journey, I hope you'll want to understand how to approach the Bible, how to teach the Bible, how to go about going after this book. And so let me give you some principles. Number one, the Bible is a melody of stories that all point towards Jesus. It really is. You might not believe that when you open up some obscure section in the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, and go, what does this have to do with Jesus? Well, trust me, it does. It all points towards Jesus, a Savior, a Messiah for people. Number two, there are various ways to study the Bible, the whole story of God, and they're all really, really good. Most of them, at least. So just jump in and start to continue to study the Bible. Number three, the Bible is all about relationships. It's all about relationships. Let me tell you a couple principles around relationships. The Bible, it's all about relationships in history. So events and stories and characters and people and plots unfolding, all pointing towards Jesus in history. Secondly, it's all about relationships in doctrine, in our teaching, in our preaching, in our explaining about what these people, how it's connected to Jesus. It's all about relationships. I mean, like an acorn that is planted in the ground, and over time through watering and nature doing its course, it'll grow into a huge oak tree. That's the way the Bible is. It starts out in a garden with two people, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. And over time, as the Bible keeps progressing forward, we get to the book of Revelation. And at the end of that, we're going to have a city of millions and millions of people who are followers of Jesus, worshiping Jesus. So it's unfolding over time because of relationships. Here's some things to think about when you're reading and studying the Bible. Number one, look for what God is doing. God is up to something. He's doing something. He's creating and developing history, playing out the future in front of us. God is going somewhere, and we get a choice whether we want to join him or not. Number two, look for what God is saying. What is God saying? He's doing something, and he's saying something all the time. The Bible will say things like, the Lord said. Or in the New Testament with Jesus, it'll say, Jesus taught his disciples. He was saying something, teaching them in parables, or giving them an object lesson, or doing things like that. Even John, his best friend, his beloved John, who wrote the Gospel of John and some other books in the New Testament, even John, right out of the start, said the Word has become flesh and come to dwell with us. So John is recognizing that Jesus is the Word. He's Logos, which is the Greek word there. He is the Word. He is what is spoken. He's the fulfillment of it all. This is how God works. He's doing stuff and he's saying stuff, and we ought to figure that out. Let me give you some examples from the Bible of where this shows up. I'm going to list some books of the Bible and where the address is that you can find them. Like in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 4, here's what it says. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who with his hands has fulfilled what he promised with his mouth. There it is, with his hands and with his mouth. With his hands, what he was doing, he's fulfilled it with what he promised from his mouth with words. This is what God has done. This is what God is saying he will do. Or Amos chapter 3, verse 7, it says this, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants and prophets. There it is again. The Lord does, is what he's doing, nothing without revealing his plan. So he reveals it through speaking it and sharing. This is what I'm going to do. And then he does it because he's faithful. Or Romans chapter 4, verse 21 says this, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what he had promised. God promised with his words, in his word, through his word, what he would do in the future, and he's done it or will do it in the future. Are you following me? Or Acts chapter 1, verse 1. Here's what Paul Luke, the good doctor, says that he's going to do. In my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach. So even in Jesus' ministry, look for what Jesus does, look for what Jesus says, because it's really, really important. All throughout the New Testament, it's all about what God is doing and what God is saying, because he's trying to advance his kingdom. Jesus is the king, and he's come to advance a new kind of kingdom, a new kind of rule about love and grace and caring for one another, which was different than the world back then and different than the world we have today. So when you read and study the Bible, keep these principles in mind. God's unfolding his plan, and it's all about Jesus. I hope this has been helpful for you as you read and study the Bible into the future. Be sure to check out all the notes below on this YouTube channel and on my blog for further reflection. I'd love your comments to create some more discussion. I'd love your ideas about what you want to hear and what you'd love for me to say on the journey as we continue to grow together. Thanks for tuning in. Keep searching for the sacred.